Welcome to the first lesson of the digital literacy course.
All right, get ready to dive deep into personal computers. Looks like you want the complete picture, right? From way back when to getting one up and running today.
We've got a really cool mix of sources for this.
We do. Computer basics books,
Mm-hmm.
a whole chapter on buying a PC, and even some serious hardware stuff.
Yeah, by the end of this, you won't just know how to pick a computer.
You'll know why you're picking what you pick.
Exactly.
I love that.
And what's so fascinating about this whole journey, you really see how we humans have always been obsessed with making tough calculations easier.
It really is constant innovation. You know, we even have some stuff here about ancient tools.
Right, like the abacus.
Do you imagine
Yeah.
trying to run a business, tracking inventory with just beads on rods?
It might seem, well, primitive now, but back then, that abacus was a game changer. People needed accurate calculations, especially as trade and all that got more complex. It's interesting, though, isn't it?
What's that?
This drive for faster, more efficient computation, it's like a thread through the entire history of computers.
It's true. And speaking of history, we've got these mechanical marvels. The Pascaline, the step reckoner. They used gears to do calculations.
Isn't that wild? Gears. The Pascaline, Blaise Pascal's invention, was basically a mechanical adding machine. Then Leibniz took that design even further with the step reckoner, added multiplication, division.
Each invention building on the last.
Exactly. It wasn't just random leaps. They were solving specific problems, limitations they saw in what came before.
Mind-blowing ingenuity.
Yeah.
But then things really take off, right? The electronic age arrives. The ENIAC, a total game changer.
Absolutely. ENIAC, it stands for Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. That thing was a beast. Took up a whole room, used thousands of vacuum tubes.
I bet it used a lot of electricity, too.
I'm sure, but it was the first programmable electronic general-purpose computer.
Wow.
It paved the way for everything we use today.
So from beads to gears to vacuum tubes, it's all about smaller, faster, more powerful. And speaking of what's inside, let's talk about the hardware that makes up a modern PC.
Sounds good. We've got great sources breaking down all the physical pieces.
The building blocks.
Yeah, let's start with the motherboard. It's like the foundation of everything. Essentially a big circuit board that's like the central nervous system, connecting every component.
I always love a good analogy.
Oh, me too.
Is it kind of like a city? The motherboard is the grid system, and everything else connects to that.
Perfect analogy. The motherboard is the city grid, providing the pathways for data to flow between components.
Okay, I like that.
And if the motherboard is the city grid, think of the CPU as City Hall, where all the decisions happen. RAM, those are like little post offices.
Constantly sorting and delivering information. I love it.
Right, and those expansion slots, like new neighborhoods being built, you can add new capabilities.
Okay, that really helps me visualize it. So
Yeah.
the CPU, Central Processing Unit, that's the brains, right?
Exactly, handling all the instructions, the calculations that make your computer work, and those tiny transistors inside. The real workhorses,
Yeah.
switching on and off billions of times per second to process all that information.
Amazing. Now, what about RAM? Random access memory. I know it's important, but what does it actually do?
Okay, think of RAM as your computer's short-term memory. It's like a workspace for the CPU, quick access to whatever it's currently working on. Imagine working on a puzzle, right?
Okay, yeah.
You wouldn't run back to the closet for every piece, would you? You'd want the ones you're using right there in front of you. That's RAM for your CPU.
So the more RAM you have, the more puzzle pieces laid out at once. Makes your computer faster, especially when you're multitasking.
Exactly. A million tabs open, streaming music, editing photos. You need RAM.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
And then there's long-term memory. Hard drives
Right.
and those solid-state drives that are so fast.
Hard disk drives, or HDDs, have been the standard for a long time. They use spinning platters and magnetic heads to read and write data, like vinyl records almost. But solid-state drives, SSDs, those are like flash drives. No moving parts, data stored on chips. Much faster, more durable.
But probably pricier.
Yeah, they can be.
So it's like choosing between a classic record player and a modern digital music player. HDD's more affordable, SSD's lightning fast.
You got it. It depends on my needs, your budget. Speed and responsiveness, SSD. Mostly storing big files, photos, videos, maybe HDD.
This is making so much sense. But we've only talked about the physical stuff, the hardware.
Yeah.
What about software? The brains behind it all.
Ah, Yes, the software.
Yeah.
Software, it's what makes your computer, well, a computer gives it instructions, lets you do all kinds of things.
It's like the language then.
Exactly. And, we've got two main categories within software.
Oh, right. The operating system or OS, like Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and then all the applications.
Exactly. The OS is the foundation. Like, it manages all the computer's activities, the user interface, runs applications, manages files, talks to the hardware.
It does a lot.
It's the conductor of the orchestra.
I like that. So when I click an icon to open a program, it's the operating system making that happen.
That's right. It's the go-between you and the hardware, translating your commands into something the computer can understand.
So many operating systems out there. Is Windows really the best? What about this Linux thing?
Well, each OS has its strengths, its weaknesses, like choosing a car, almost.
Okay. Yep.
Windows is the most popular. It's known for being user-friendly, works with lots of software. It's like the reliable family sedan.
Gotcha.
Mac OS. That's on Apple computers, known for being sleek, good for creative stuff. Maybe more like a stylish sports car.
Okay, interesting.
Then there's Linux, open source, very customizable for those who like to tinker under the hood.
So tech-savvy users?
Exactly. A powerful off-road vehicle. So the choice depends on what you want your computer to do, your overall experience.
Do I want a smooth ride? Or the freedom to tinker under the hood? I like that analogy. So after the OS, we've got applications. Or just apps. The stuff we actually use to do things.
Right. Word processing, spreadsheets, photo editing, all that.
A tool, the instruments in the orchestra, each with a specific role.
Exactly.
It's funny, some software still uses icons from like the floppy disk era.
I know, right? Little blast from the past.
It's true. One of the sources mentioned it too, how those old designs can be confusing for new users. Technology's always moving forward, but design doesn't always keep up.
It's all part of the evolution, I guess.
Yeah. So hardware, software, we've got the brains in the body. What about all the ways we connect things? Ports, peripherals, networking.
Ah, yes. That's where it can get tricky.
For me, it does. I always feel like I'm just guessing.
I get it. But don't worry, we've got some good info here on actually setting things up.
Perfect.
Let's start with those ports, the physical connection points, right? For all those external devices, we've got USB, Ethernet, HDMI.
Okay, yeah. I always feel like, is this the one for my printer, my monitor, hard drive?
Right. But once you know what each port does, it's much clearer. USB, Universal Serial Bus, is the workhorse. Keyboards, mice, printers, external drives, it handles it all.
So that's why my phone charger uses a USB cable. It all connects.
Exactly. So versatile. Then you've got Ethernet, typically for wired networking, fast, reliable connection to the internet, and HDMI, high-definition multimedia interface. That's your standard for high-definition displays.
Like my TV, my monitor. So if I want to watch a movie on the big screen, gotta use HDMI.
You got it. Carries both audio and video.
Awesome. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand these ports.
Good.
Now, what about peripherals? I hear that word all the time, but I'm not sure what it actually means.
Peripherals are basically all the external stuff you connect.
Keyboard, mouse, monitor, printer, all of that.
All of that. Webcam, too. Basically the supporting cast. And choosing the right ones can really make a difference in how you use your computer.
Okay, yeah.
A graphic designer might want a super high-resolution monitor for color accuracy.
Makes sense.
A gamer wants a high-performance mouse and keyboard, fast response times. It's like building your custom setup.
Tailored to what you need it for.
Exactly. And technology keeps moving forward, so we're seeing more and more specialized peripherals.
That's so cool.
Oh.
Didn't realize there were so many options. Now, what about networking? How computers talk to each other, how we get online, wired versus wireless home networks.
Networking. It can seem complicated, but at its core, it's about connecting devices so they can share data. Wired, using Ethernet cables, wireless, using Wi-Fi. Those are the most common types for home networks.
I've always heard wired is faster, more reliable. Is that true?
Generally, yeah. With wired, you've got a dedicated physical pathway for data, so there's less chance of interference, signal loss, like a direct phone line versus a cell phone.
Okay, that makes sense.
Wireless, though. Wi-Fi. It's about freedom. Move around, no cables, like having a cordless phone. Roam around, stay connected.
But I've definitely had slow Wi-Fi dropped signals. Is that just how it is?
Well, Wi-Fi signals, they can be affected by distance from the router, physical things like walls, and interference from other devices. It's like having a weak cell phone signal. Sometimes you need to move around for a better connection.
So it's a trade-off. Wired for speed and reliability, wireless for convenience, mobility.
Exactly. And setting up a home network. You'll need a router that supports what you want, The router is like the central hub managing all the data traffic.
Oh, right. One of the sources had a whole section on choosing the right router. It even mentioned something called wireless security.
Super important. That's about protecting your network from unauthorized access. Make sure your router has strong encryption, like WPA2 or WPA3.
That's why we need those complicated passwords for our Wi-Fi.
That's it. Keeps others from connecting, potentially accessing your stuff. Think of it like a lock on your front door.
I'm definitely checking my router settings after this. Had no idea how important that was.
It's one of those things that's easy to overlook, but really important for keeping your data safe.
Okay, so networking. How computers talk to each other, to the internet. Now, what about data storage? We touched on hard drives and solid-state drives earlier. Is there more to the story?
Definitely. How we store information digitally. We've got traditional hard disk drives, the newer solid-state drives, optical drives, and cloud storage, which is getting more and more popular.
Optical drives. Those are for CDs and DVDs, right? Do people even use those anymore?
They're not as common as they used to be, but they're still useful for certain things, storing big files, videos, backups.
One source even said some laptops don't come with DVD drives anymore.
Yeah, with streaming and cloud storage, not as necessary. Some desktops still have them, though, and you can always get an external one. It's about having the right tool.
So many ways to store information now. It's kind of overwhelming. What about cloud-based storage? Everyone seems to be talking about that.
Cloud storage is definitely becoming more popular. You're basically storing your files on servers, access them through the internet, like renting a digital storage locker. Instead of saving to your computer's hard drive, you save to a server somewhere else.
So instead of saving it here on my computer, I save it to the cloud.
Exactly. And you can access those files from any device with an internet connection. Plus, it's like an extra backup, just in case something happens to your computer.
Makes sense. Like a giant digital storage locker, I can get to it from anywhere, and I don't have to worry about losing everything if my computer crashes.
Perfect analogy. And there are lots of popular options like Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox.
Oh yeah, I actually use Google Drive to back up my photos. It's so easy to access them from anywhere. My phone, my computer. Doesn't matter.
Super convenient. And as you learn more about computers, you'll find even more specialized storage options, like network attached storage or NAS.
Yes. What's that?
It's like having your own personal cloud storage right there on your home network. A bit more advanced, but great for sharing files between devices or creating a backup hub for all your important stuff.
It's crazy. We went from floppy disks to all this.
Technology moves fast, doesn't it?
It does. So we've covered hardware, software, connecting everything, networking, data storage. It's been a lot.
A whirlwind tour, but important stuff.
It really is.
Yeah.
I feel like I actually understand what's inside a computer now, how all the pieces work together.
That's great. But there's one more important thing we haven't talked about yet.
Oh, what's that?
You, the user, how you interact with the computer.
Interesting. It's not just the tech itself, it's how we use it.
Exactly. And I've definitely had my moments trying to figure things out.
Me too. So how do we make this whole experience better? More comfortable, productive, enjoyable?
Good question. Let's start with the user interface. Basically, how you talk to the computer, give it instructions. The bridge between what you want and what the computer does.
Okay, so like the dashboard of the computer. All the controls.
Think of it like that. And these days, the most common type is the graphical user interface, GUI, windows, icons, menus, pointers, designed to be intuitive, easy to use.
Yeah, that's what I'm used to.
Yeah.
But I remember reading about older computers using a command line interface. You had to type in commands to do anything.
That's right. It can seem daunting, but for some, it offers a lot of control, flexibility. It's like speaking the computer's language directly.
One of our sources mentioned that, how some programmers prefer it.
Yeah.
Gets them closer to the action.
Right. But for everyday stuff, the GUI is the way to go, like using a touch screen versus memorizing keyboard shortcuts.
It's amazing how user interfaces have become so much easier to use. Like the computer's trying to speak our language now.
Exactly. And I think as technology keeps developing, they'll only get more intuitive, more seamless.
I can't wait to see what they come up with. Now, what about input and output devices? That's how we talk to the computer and how it talks back to us.
Exactly. We give it input, it gives us output, input. Think keyboard, mouse. Those are the classics.
Makes sense. And output would be the monitor, the printer.
Right.
You got it. Keyboard for typing, mouse for navigating, clicking.
One source had a whole list of input devices, scanners, webcams, even microphones.
It's incredible. So many ways to interact with computers now. Scanners, digitized paper, webcams for video calls, microphones for recording, voice commands.
Like it's becoming more a part of our lives, always new ways to connect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as technology keeps evolving, expect even more innovative input and output devices.
Exciting. But with all this tech, all this screen time, we have to be mindful of our bodies, right? I've definitely had eye strain, neck pain from long computer sessions.
You bring up a good point. As computers become more common, we have to think about how they affect us physically. And that's where ergonomics comes in.
Ergonomics. That's about posture, comfort, making things easier on our bodies.
Right.
Exactly. Designing things so we can use them efficiently and safely, especially with computers. If you're spending hours in front of a screen, one of our sources had a whole section on this with tips on posture, keyboard placement, even lighting.
Wow.
It's about creating a good workspace, comfortable and supportive. Your chair, your keyboard, your mouse, your monitor, all positioned correctly. And lighting. Don't forget about lighting. Glare from your screen can cause eye strain.
It's not just about having the latest gadgets. It's about using them in a way that's good for us. Sustainable.
I like that word, sustainable. And as you become more tech savvy, always remember, technology should serve us, not the other way around.
That's a good point. I'm definitely going to be more mindful of my posture, take breaks.
Good. And there are tons of resources out there to help you create a healthy workspace.
So we've covered a lot, from the history of computers to how they actually work, hardware, software, the user interface, connecting everything, networking, data storage, even ergonomics. Wow.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. A little information overload, maybe?
That's understandable. Just remember, focus on what's most relevant to you, what you need, what you're interested in. You don't have to be an expert overnight.
That's a relief.
Yeah.
I do feel like I have a much deeper understanding of computers now. Even if I don't remember every single detail, I have a new appreciation for the technology.
And that's what matters. Understanding how things work, it empowers you. You can use them more effectively, make better choices about the tech in your life.
So what's next? Where do we go from here?
I'd like to pose that question to you, the listener. What are you curious about? What aspect of computers do you want to learn more about?
That is a great question.
Does programming fascinate you? Cybersecurity? What about the ethics of artificial intelligence? Those are big topics these days.
I love that. This deep dive has given us the basics, but it's also opened up so many new paths.
The beauty of learning, it never ends.
And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to encourage everyone listening. Keep learning. Explore those new curiosities, ask questions, and never stop. It's amazing, right, how far we've come, from those early counting tools to the computers we have today. But as we rely on technology more and more, I think it's important to step back a bit. Look at the bigger picture.
I agree. Computers, they're more than just machines. They have the potential to do so much good.
Right.
But that comes with responsibility. We can't just think about the technical side.
We have to think about the human side.
Exactly. The societal impact.
Yeah.
As you keep exploring computers, think about the ethics of it all. How can we use them to solve problems, bridge divides, create a more just world?
Those are big questions.
They are, but important ones. How do we make sure technology is used for good? That it doesn't make existing inequalities worse?
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of new tech. Forget about all that.
It's true. We have to remember technology isn't neutral. It reflects the values, the biases of the people who create it, who use it.
That's a good point. So what can we do?
Well, with all you've learned, with your own perspective, I think you're in a great position to be part of the conversation. Help shape the future of technology in a positive way.
I'm feeling inspired. It's like this deep dive hasn't just taught me about computers. It's challenged me to think about their place in the world, our responsibility as users, as creators.
And that's what knowledge is for, right? To help us make better decisions, use what we understand to make a difference.
You couldn't have said it better myself.
Yes.
So as we wrap things up, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Just this. The world of computers, it's constantly changing, what we talked about today. A snapshot. There's so much more out there, new technologies all the time.
It can feel overwhelming.
It can. But remember the fundamentals. They stay the same.
That's good to know. So even as things change, what we've learned here, it's a good starting point.
You've got the foundation. You understand how computers work, how they affect our lives. And as technology keeps moving forward, you'll be able to adapt, learn, keep exploring.
It's exciting and a little daunting.
Yeah.
But mostly exciting. I feel like a whole new world has opened up.
And that's the beauty of it. The journey's just beginning. Keep exploring, keep learning, keep asking those tough questions. The future of technology is in our hands. It's up to us to shape it for the better.
Well said. And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has been fun, informative, maybe even a little inspiring. We've covered a lot, from ancient tools to modern tech, explored how technology is shaping our world. But remember, this is just the start. Keep those curiosity circuits firing, never stop exploring the incredible world of computers.